You ever see a 3D animated logo and think, damn, I wish I could do that, but I'm broke, allergic to Blender, and mildly afraid of nodes? Well, you can, and you're going to do it right here inside of DaVinci Resolve, the free version. No plugins, no shady downloads, no spending 3 days learning Blender's UI just to make a cube move. By the end of this video, you'll go from I make cuts to I direct light and motion in 3D space, like a Fusion expert. Alright, we're in a fresh Fusion comp, and as always, we're going to start off with an alpha background node. And we can just move this down because we're not going to need it for a while. Let's bring in our logo. We'll need this one here and this one here. So what we want to do is run these into a shape node. Should already be set to plane. If it's not, you change it right here. And then let's change our subdivisions to something like 100. The higher the subdivisions, the more data Resolve has to work with. So if you turn this up, you will get a better look, but it will be harder on your computer. Let's click our shape node, shift space, and add a duplicate 3D. We can bring this up into the viewer. Let's change the copies to 75 and change the Z offset to -0.001. And now we have a 3D logo. Also, if you want to move around in 3D space, wheel click will let you drag the viewer around. Wheel click and left will let you zoom in and out. You just got to move the mouse left or right. Wheel click and right will let you rotate. You just drag left or right while holding both buttons. Alright, let's copy this and paste, and then run our other image into here also. Now let's merge these together. Doesn't look quite right. We're going to fix that. Let's add a transform after our duplicate here for the teardrop shape, and we're going to shrink it down. Let's actually deactivate this duplicate node so we can see what we got going on. So we need to raise it just a bit and shrink it a little bit more. So right about there. Then we can move it back so we're in the middle. That's just going to be your Z translation. We need to make it a bit bigger. There we go. And instead of using a duplicate node here, let's cut that, copy this, and paste again. Let's go to two viewers. I want to bring our logo up in the viewer, and then I'm going to take a rectangle node and run it into the mask input. Let's invert that, and let's just try to mask out everything but the edges. Then around the corners. Looks pretty good. Alright, let's click this Shape3D. Let's add a duplicate. Same thing as before. We'll add 75 copies and -0.001 for the offset. Alright, looking pretty good. Let's add another transform after our new duplicate, and we'll just move it back. Like we went too far. Alright, so that's a pretty good looking 3D logo. Let's go through our shape nodes and make sure all of our subdivisions are at 100. They are. Alright, now let's add some text. Let's grab a 3D text node, hook it up into our merge. Alright, let's center this in the transform tab, bring it down, and then we can bring it forward. I think it's a little big. Then we can bring it down a little bit more. Alright, something like that looks pretty good. Now let's make it 3D. But first, let's change our font type. Blocky fonts look better in 3D. So I'm going to choose Impact. Then we're going to come down here to the Extrusion tab. We're going to up the subdivision to something like 100. And then change the extrusion depth, and you can see the text starts to grow. Let's go into the shading tab and uncheck use one material. Let's make the bevel material black, or you can make it slightly gray. And now we can really see our depth. All right, let's increase that a bit more. And we can add a bevel. Zoom in here and look at our bevel. All right, it looks pretty good. A little bit more room by getting rid of our media pool. All right, let's click our merge and let's add a renderer. You want to come into the renderer and switch it to hardware. You want to switch the texture depth to float 32. Z buffer should be sorted, and then the shading model should be smooth. And what the renderer does is converts our 3D space into 2D. Looks like we might be a bit off center. We can come into our text, back into the transform. Just adjust it a little. All right, that looks pretty good. All right, let's do some lighting. So let's click our renderer, and we want to enable shadows and lighting. And you'll see in our 2D image, everything goes black. So we need to add some lights. Click your merge and hit shift space, and add an ambient light. You can see our ambient light show up in the merge here. Ambient lights don't cast shadows, so generally they're going to go up above your scene. Like that, and then we can just play with the intensity until we get something we like. Alright, now let's add some shadows. So again, click your merge, and you can click the spotlight here, and you see our spotlight show up. I'm going to grab the blue arrow and pull it back. And then let's move it over off to one side, and we can select this little circle here and we can rotate it. Let's point out our logo. All right, now we can play with a cone angle, the penumbra angle, and we can change our decay type to linear. And then you can play with the decay rate and your intensity. You can even raise this up a bit. And now let's grab the red circle and angle it down some. All right, that says pretty good. Now let's take our spotlight, copy it, and paste. Put that into our merge. Let's grab our new one. And we're just going to reset all of our translations. And this is a little pro tip. This is going to be our kicker light. So we want to move this behind our object. Let's flip it around. And we can have it pointing at a little angle. Now let's move it off to the side. Be a little bit too far. And let's rotate it towards our logo. Get a little bit more there. I think we can back it up some. Now what this is going to do is create little highlights on the edges of our text and logo. So let's turn it off and see if we can tell the difference. You see how the bevel now has highlights on it because of our kicker light. All right, let's go back to one viewer for a second. Now we can also add highlights with lights called point lights. So let's click our merge, type in point. Let's grab our point light. Now I'm going to go ahead and add two. I'm going to take one point light and switch it to red. And we can play with our intensity. Turn on our decay. I think we can leave it all the way up. That's okay. And we're going to move it forward. Raise it up. I think we're going to use this to make a highlight on our logo. So right in the red here, I'm just going to put it really close to our object so we get a highlight effect. Real quick, if you're serious about making your stuff not suck, I use a platform called Audio for all my music and sound effects. It's got every cinematic whoosh, bass drop, transition, and ambient overlay you could dream of. It's not the usual stock junk. It's legit pro assets to make your video as good as they look. Well, as good as they look after you're finished watching my videos. You've been listening to their music this entire video. You can get 70% off an annual audio subscription using my link below and the code SAVE70. Can't beat that deal. Helps out the channel and I'd really appreciate it. All right, back to Fusion. Let's put it right in the red of the little teardrop. All right, let's bring back up our 2D. It's a little strong, so we can turn it down. And let's move it over just a bit. All right, that's pretty good. And let's take our other point light. And let's put it on our text. Let's make this one blue. And we can play with our intensity, K rate. Alright, I'd say we've already got a pretty cool scene here. I think our DaVinci logo needs to go up some. So I'm actually going to put this merge and I'm going to add another merge. I'm just going to move all of our lights over to it. Nothing should really change. Now I can click this merge and add a transform and use one node to move our merge however we want to. So let's make it a bit bigger. We can raise it up some. Bring this up in the second viewer so we can see everything together. Now let's move our text down. And make it a little bit bigger. Not that big. Let's try 0.8. Maybe down a little bit further. And one more time, move our logo up just a little bit. Adjust our point lights. All right, now let's add a camera. Let's click our merge and hit the camera icon. And you can see everything disappears from our 2D scene because by default, the camera starts out in the middle of the scene. So let's drag it and pull this back till we see something we like. And we can raise it up a little bit. All right, looks about like how we had it. So let's add some camera movement. So what I like to do is pick out how I want my scene to look at the end. So we'll come into the transform tab and we're going to click use target. And that should make this little line and crosshairs appear. We want to position this target right here in the middle of the scene. And you can grab it and move it around, or you can use the screws under the target menu to position it. I think I'm gonna put it right in the middle of our logo. I think that's pretty good. Now, no matter where you move the camera, it's always going to point towards that target. So let's decide how we want it to look at the end of our animation. I think I'm going to move mine over a bit. I really want to see the edges and all the lights. Keep going with it. I think I can zoom in. And I'm also going to raise it up a little bit. Now we're cutting off the bottom. I'm going to go up a little bit more. And just pull it back so we get the full scene. Oh, not quite that far. It's being a little laggy. If you want to help with that, you can come down here and right click in the little bar and turn off high quality, turn off motion blur. But remember to turn on motion blur when you're finished. We're going to add that at the very end because it is very taxing on your computer. All right, let's zoom in just a bit. A little bit down. Maybe down a little bit. All right, I think that's pretty cool. Now we got to pick where we want our animation to end. I think I'm going to choose about frame 100. And I'm just going to set keyframes on everything. And let's go back to the beginning of our comp and pick where we want our camera animation to start. So I think I'm going to start from the side. But you could start way far back. You could start up close. You could start behind it, pull out and like rise up. The possibilities are endless. I'm gonna go way down to the side here and zoom in. We'll start down low. I think that'd be pretty cool. But we need to adjust the size of our teardrops here. So I'm going to come into transform and let's try 0.6 and see what that does. Okay, there we go. Now we can't see the logo underneath it. Let's go back to our camera and it's already created keyframes. Let's see how it looks. Not bad, but I think we can do better. Let's come to somewhere around the middle of our animation and let's add another movement to our camera. So maybe let's drag it up. And let's drag it back maybe. I think that's pretty cool. Now let's open up our spline, select everything, stretch the fit, select all your points, and let's just smooth it out. You can actually see how the camera path, the red line, becomes smooth. All right, let's see what we got now. See how it looks at the end. All right, I'll say that's pretty good. Now let's add some movement to the individual objects in our 3D scene. So let's grab our transform here and we can bring it up in the viewer. So make sure the pivot is right in the middle. I think we need to lower it just a bit because we're going to add a spinning animation to this, and if it's not in the center it looks a little bit weird. So let's say we want the spinning animation to end about frame 60. So let's keyframe our Y rotation and go back to the beginning and let's just go 360. Let's bring up our renderer. Let's see what we got. All right, it's bumping into our text, but we can fix that. All right, let's open up our spline and go ahead and smooth this before we forget. Let's go to, let's say frame 70, and let's grab our text and come into the transform tab, and let's set keyframes. And go back to one viewer for now. Zoom in here so we can see what we're doing. Zoom in here so we can see what we're doing. Bring it up some more. Be a little bit too much. Bring it back down. Let's bring it forward. And let's bring it off to the side. Pick our spine. And let's smooth. Click off of this and bring it back up in our left viewer. And let's see what we got. Alright, that's looking pretty cool. Let's take it up another notch. Let's click these duplicate 3Ds and add a replace 3D materials. Off in the empty grid, let's add a Phong node, P-H-O-N-G. And we're going to connect that to our replace 3D materials node. Now we're going to take the output of our 2D image and put it into our Phong node. And you can come into the Phong and go to the specular, and the exponent changes how shiny our materials become. You can see how the red light is growing based on the exponent number. You can make it where it really diffuses the light, or not quite so much. I think I'm just going to bump mine up just a little. And then I'm going to select these two nodes, copy, paste, and we'll run this Shape3D into this replace materials node, connect it back up, and same thing. And then we'll do it for the final one also. This is going to add just another little touch to our 3D scene. Alright, I'd say that looks pretty cool. Alright, there's a few more things we can do. We can grab a background node. Let's bring it up in the left viewer and let's make it a gradient. And let's play with the gradient line and just do something like this. Alright, we're going to run that into a shape node and connect that up to our merge. And you can see now we have basically a solid background. We got to do a little bit to it though. So let's take this shape node and we're going to move it back. Let's change the scale to something crazy like 25. We want it to be huge. Bring our renderer back up. Yeah, we can actually even make it bigger, something like 32. If you want to, you can add those same replace material nodes to our background. Alright, it's looking pretty cool. Let's actually click this replace 3D material node, hit shift space. We're going to add a Bender 3D. Let's zoom out in our merge so we can see what we're doing. Leave it just like it is, and then let's up the amount. You can see our shape starts to curve around our 3D scene. Take your shape node and let's raise it up. I want this to be kind of like a floor and a background for our 3D scene. So we can move it back a little bit more. Raise it up just a tad bit. And you can mess with this Bender node quite a lot. You get different kinds of shapes with the range and the center. See what we're looking like. Then we can move it up some more. And let's bring our background node up. select it, and we can just play with this until we get something we like. You can even make this black a little bit lighter. I'd say that's pretty cool. Alright, let's keyframe our lights. Move the camera up, and then say we want all of our lights to be at full intensity about frame 90. So let's keyframe all of our intensities on all of our lights. Get them all? I think so. All right, then let's go back to the beginning and set a keyframe and turn them all the way down. Come into our spline. I'm gonna select them all. This time I'm gonna right click, go into ease. I think I'm gonna pick out cubic. See how that looks. Looks like we need to back up our background just a little bit, because you can see right here, right there, it gets cut off. So we'll just come back into our shape, and let's make it negative 2.9. See how that does. Like that gets it. And depending on what you're doing, this transparent part here might not work for you. So you can just come into the shape and keep making it bigger until you can't see it anymore. Another little tip that you can do to really set your 3D scenes off is come into the camera and keyframe the focal plane. This is the focal plane, the screen box. Whatever's closest to it is going to be more in focus than what's farther away from it. So we can start at the beginning. And it looks like our focal plane is right on it. So we can set a keyframe here. Then we can go to the middle. Let's pull our focal point back. Also set a keyframe, and then let's go to the end of our animation and adjust our focal plane till it's right on our scene. And then of course we want to smooth that. Get just our focal point here, select everything and smooth. All right, then we can come into our renderer. Go to the settings, turn on motion blur. I like to set my quality at 4 and shutter angle to like 90. You also can go back to the controls, come down to accumulation effects, and turn on enable accumulation effects. This is super heavy on your computer. So I'm gonna turn this like way down to like 6, and then make the amount of depth of field blur to like 0.007, like just a really small amount. It is very taxing on your computer. All right, all we have left to do is to select our alpha background, add a merge, drag this over, and feed it back to the edit page. All right, let's go back and see what it looks like. Alright, I know this animation isn't exactly like the one in the intro, but it would take a lot longer tutorial to explain. So I added it as a downloadable file on my Ko-Fi for free. Download it, open a Fusion comp, and drag the file onto the node grid. Replace the media end nodes with the PNG you downloaded from the link I've also linked in the description. Then you can dig in and see exactly how I made the animation. I recommend turning off the depth of field and motion blur before you dig in and see how I made the animation. Look at that. You made the kind of visual that stops thumbs from scrolling, that makes people go, wait, how did they do that? And you did it without spending money, without buying plugins, without faking it, all inside of Resolve, all on your own terms. And hey, next time some keyboard warrior says After Effects is better, send them this video. Like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you in the next video.